My name is Nolan Hack. I'm a black activist from the city of Los Angeles, California.
My name is Derrick. I am a double master's student, part-time activist, and full-time writer.
My name is Julie Guy. I'm from Jackson, Michigan. I'm not your Mascot, Michigan Coalition Against Racism in Sports and Media activist.
Okay, I'm Remy. I do work with the Mascot issue, and I'm in Pennsylvania.
Hi, I'm Kima Nieves, and I'm a Native activist from Virginia.
Okay, so here we go. Election was yesterday, and I'm already hearing people talking about the next election. So it's like Christmas or something. I did not feel like it was Christmas yesterday. Anybody want to start off with their personal thoughts on this political structure that we're in or under, or last night in general, or any of the above?
I'll let one of the ladies go.
Well, in terms of the elections we had in Virginia, it was terrifying. But I really didn't have any hope going into it. But I'm pleasantly surprised. But in terms of like governmental structure, I don't know. I struggle with the idea of voting. I mean, I vote every year, every election, but it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it, because it's like Native representation is pretty much non-existent. Like none of these elections ever represent Native people or interests. Like even Northrum, I mean, he's the only one that was really against fracking, and that's pretty much what motivated me to vote for him in the first place. But like, there's no guarantee that they ever hold up to it. So I don't know. It just seems like kind of a bittersweet ordeal for me, and I go through it every year. It's like, well, we don't really fit into the system. We never have, and the system is built for genocide, but I guess I got to vote anyways because it's just so bad.
In Texas, there was also an election. I think the overall turnout was something like 11% of people. Like, there's a long-standing tradition of Texas just being like a non-voting state, and that's for a lot of reasons. One of them, I feel like, is because like the state makes it so difficult. Like the voting districts are so gerrymandered. The maps have been invalidated like 5 or 6 different times. We don't even know if we're going to get new maps before the 2018 election. The Supreme Court's supposed to be handling that now and dragging its feet on that. So all in all, I can understand why people who live in Texas are pretty pessimistic about voting. But like Kima, like I vote in every election just because, I guess because of how I was raised. I was kind of always told, like, you don't get to do nothing. So like even like the last presidential election, I wasn't really crazy about the candidates, but I had like a HIV positive friend, and he was either going to have to get like insurance. He had just gotten fired, and he was going to have to get insurance through like Cobra or something. That's like, it's like I guess a company that you can buy insurance from when you like just get laid off. It's super expensive. It's like $700 or $800 a month for him, and like he wouldn't have been able to afford to like get an apartment and go to school. He's still at the University of Texas as as a student. And then or he could like sign up for Obamacare. And I think he was going to be paying like a little less than $200, which is still a lot, but he would have been able to like live on his own and stuff. And so like that was probably the main motivation for me voting last presidential election, was just trying to put him in the best situation and the people who might be like him. So I try to do like, I never feel like I can get what I want per se, but I try to get, I try to do the most good for the most amount of people, but I do understand like the disenchantment with like the election system. I just don't understand a lot of like, I guess, the comments that I read online that, I don't know, sometimes seem to me to suggest that we should like do nothing, or we should be going for like a different system. But I don't disagree with that, but it's like, well, what did we do in the meantime?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much my approach all these years. It's like, well, nobody is truly about making that immediate radical change that we need to do a complete overhaul of how this structure is. Like, it's just, I just don't, I mean, I want it to happen, but it's just realistically, we need more people to be on board with that kind of change. So it's like, well, I mean, I have to participate or else just let it completely fall apart,
right.
or let more people get hurt. And
right.
it just sucks altogether.
It does.
Yeah. Yeah, I always feel like you're voting for the lesser of two evil.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, but when I went into the booth for the election yesterday, I just went straight Democrat. I mean, after what the Republicans have been doing has been so heartless. I didn't even have to look at who was on the Democrat Party. I just pressed Democrat and vote, and I was done, you know. And I think a lot of people did that because they're fed up. And, I mean, you can see that there was this backlash where, you know, people went Democrat, and it really became diversified because there was I believe the first black female mayor. There was I don't know if I'm saying this right, a chic mayor in New Jersey. An Asian American was elected, an elected official. I'm not sure where that was. A black governor. And there was a transgender woman who ran up against the man that drew up the bathroom bill. You know, so they really shook things up, and people came out and supported them. There was a civil rights lawyer who sued the police department, became the top prosecutor in Philadelphia.
I saw that.
So, yeah, so I mean, there was a big shakeup, and people came out and supported people that may not have been supported before this whole Trump thing happened, you know. But they got behind him this time and said, you know, that's not how we're doing it. You know, it's just too much hate to follow things the Trump way. So I was really happy to see that.
We didn't even have granted, I wouldn't want ever a Republican option or Democratic option, but by comparison, Democrat. But there was only Democrats on the ballot in terms of people who could actually win for Senate out here. And Feinstein was up for re-election. And the other person, I mean, it's like, again, lesser of two evils. So and the other senator we have is awful. So I didn't vote personally. I voted before. I probably will vote again. I just didn't. And I have too much stuff going on outside of that, so it's kind of like, okay, I'm just but I didn't vote the last in the presidential election. That was because, for one, I couldn't vote for either one of those people, and I would have voted for like a fifth party, like Moorhead and Lilly or Stein or something, but I was or still am, an advocate for an individual who's on death row and is innocent. And there were two bills in Cali that were like to kill death row or make it stronger. And I learned the day before the election that if the bill that would have eliminated death row got stronger, all death row inmates would have to wait to have visitors for an undetermined amount of time, meaning a long time. All visits would have been through plexiglass from then on. A lot of people would have been moved because they'd no longer be death row. It'd be just general population, or max, supermax. So I actually phone banked before that, like days leading up to that, to try to make sure one passed and one didn't. And I feel like a chump, to quote Malcolm, for doing that, because this is the ultimate lesser. There was no lesser in that, in my mind, and even my friend who's on death row said, like, there's no win here. I'd either get killed sooner or my limited rights get shortened even further. So it's yes, I mean it's lesser of two evils, and then sometimes it's trying to, like Derrick said, trying to for your own personal situation or people around you. I've heard similar things, especially the last election. Which for one individual, for your family, or for insurance, or for healthcare, or what have you. I think one thing that gets lost with our two people is, and Kima kind of touched on it, this isn't our formula. This isn't our way of thinking. There's a reason why it keeps disagreeing with us, because we're allergic to it. We're using something that we didn't use until they forced us to use it in terms of their political structure, their ideology. It's a 180. Our particular, nations on one side and the other of the Atlantic. It's like a 180 from this fake democracy, capitalistic, system.
I just I don't know. I just have a really hard time every time I try to like convince myself, or like to try to talk myself into not doing it, or like to not vote. Like I just can't square it. Even like the last election, there was for the sheriff, an office that I'd never really cared for, but the two people running were outside of. I was voting outside the University of Texas, and the two individuals running for the office, they were out there and they were kind of just talking to the students. I wasn't a student at that time. I was just happened to be voting there. And, one was talking about, cooperating with the state, and, Texas is, pretty conservative. So cooperating with it and, deporting as many people as possible. And then the person I ended up voting for, she was talking about, keeping communities together and, not doing that. And so that's who I ended up voting for. And so I am happy that I voted for her, because even though she hasn't been able to stop all the deportations, this is a really conservative state. You probably need to live in like one of like the 3 bigger cities to like more or less be safe. And even then, like there was a court case recently that ruled that she had to start complying with certain things. So it's gotten a little bit weaker, but it's like, I'm sure the people who are safe, like it means something to them that they might not be deported. And then some of those people are, there was an article the other day, she's a young lady, she's African American or Black DACA recipient, and she was talking about living in Texas and how difficult it was. And so, I mean, I can never square not doing anything. Like, I do understand, like, the desire to want to change, but it's like the conversation to change it would, like, have to happen before the election. Like, we would have had to have been talking about what we were going to change the system to and building a consensus. And if that's what folks want, then that's what we have to start doing. But I guess I just don't always see like the purpose of like leading up to a vote. Like sometimes I'll see folks like, I'm not doing this, and you know, everyone's, you know, you have your own space, you can say whatever you want. But I know that I didn't want to say anything like with the last presidential election when I was voting for health insurance. I didn't want to say anything that I felt might kind of demoralize people, make people not come out, because I knew that I needed folks to go out, vote for a particular person so that my friend wouldn't necessarily have to live in the reality that he does now, like what's going to happen with Obamacare, is he going to have insurance, is he going to be able to stay in school, is he going to be able to keep paying his rent. I even had like a medical scare very, very briefly, and it turned out to be nothing, where they thought it might be cancer. And I'm fine, but I was thinking about like, well, what if it was cancer? And I'm also having to sit here and deal with Donald Trump talking about he still wants to repeal Obamacare. And Obamacare might not be perfect. It might not be, you know, what I want, which would be single payer, but to have cancer and to be worried about whether or not you're going to be able to keep your insurance, like that just must be maddening. And I don't want to put people through that kind of stress if they don't have to go through it. I mean,
I agree with that. Derrick, that whole healthcare situation it's a mess because there's no stability. You know, we don't know if there's going to be Obamacare or not, so you can't really count on that. If you have employer medical through your employer, the prices go up each year significantly. So it gets to be where it's so expensive either way, and you don't want to let that go. I'm just recently retired from my job, and I have medical from my former employer. But if I drop it, I lose it forever, and I can never get it back. But then I couldn't go to something like Obamacare because it's unstable, and I don't know if it's going to be around next year. So I mean, you're trapped. You're just trapped in this system where you keep paying higher premiums every year, and it's terrible. In Michigan here, we didn't have any significant races per se. We did have city commissions and mayors and that thing of the smaller cities. Our mayor here in Jackson, thank goodness, got voted out, and it was because of the LGBT issue, the non-discrimination order that the city and the residents and the churches and everybody has been wrangling with for the last year. And there have been protests constantly and even violence for a while. The woman that was running the LGBT advocacy group, her house was burnt down. and
Wow.
it's being investigated, as a hate crime. And so that was all over the media. It's been all over the media for months and months. So, I mean, the visibility and everything, the mayor actually spoke out, did not want the non-discrimination order, which would have banned discrimination against gays and lesbians as far as employment in the city and housing. And he fought it tooth and nail, and he came out against it, and it was just a really ugly scene. But after it passed, the non-discrimination order finally passed, and then he took credit for it passing. Even though he voted against it and fought against it, he still took credit for it passing because it passed when he was in office.
Right.
And it was just like, oh my gosh, this guy is a scumbag. And yeah, he did get voted out, so that was a good thing. But other than that, we have the gerrymandering petitions that are being circulated, and I think we're pretty close to having enough signatures to get it on the ballot next year. So that's a good thing. Michigan is the west side of the state is ultra conservative, and the east side of the state tends to be more liberal. So it's cut right in half. And I spent the day actually yesterday in Lansing in the Capitol building. I met with the Michigan Legislative Black Caucus because asking for their support for our anti-Redskins bill that we have in committee right now. And they were very supportive. And in fact, there have been two more anti-Mascot bills, one introduced and one will be introduced in the House here very shortly. And so I and my colleague ran around to the different senators and visiting them, asking them for support. And it's already getting kind of gummed up for next year, election year, because, you can tell by the way they talk that they're not going to take a stand. Or that they're doing something to protect one of their other senators in another part of the state for an issue that they don't want to come under fire for. And it's just jockeying already for a position. And our governor will be timed out next year. And so we have our attorney general's running for a governor, and he's a creep that will not deal with the Flint water crisis and won't shut down the Line 5 that goes underneath the Straits of Mackinac between the Great Lakes. And it's going to be just really bad next year as far as the people jockeying position and doing all kinds of underhanded things and just the way they talk. It's just I just really don't like it already.
The governor here is trying to do this constitutional convention where you need 34 states basically to call it, and he's trying to limit the power of the federal government, what they're always trying to do in the South. And so we've been fighting that. He's so terrible, and it's just terrible in general. Even the things that passed last night, a lot of them were tax break incentives, which is what they're always trying to pass, giving people more reasons not to pay taxes, which means the state has less money. We can't do things for roads, because there's just a religion here that there just cannot be any taxes. And we just have to give as many people as breaks as possible, even though there's not a whole lot of studies that work to verify how much money is the state supposedly bringing in for all these breaks that we're giving. A lot of times in other states, it's not really worth it. It ends up making living here not as pleasant, because when you get a ticket here, it's 3 to 4 times what it would be in another state, because the only way they can tax people now is through this punitive measure now. And that usually falls
they're using
on the
it to raise money.
Yeah, and that usually falls on the poor. And so I usually go out to vote against that crap too. It's I wish I could just be oh no, I'm not gonna do that, or oh, it's not like what was before. But I can't reckon with it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I always vote because I feel that the women before me fought so hard for women to vote. And the natives didn't have a right to vote, you know. So I always make sure I vote. I always feel like if you didn't vote, you don't have a right to complain. Unless you're in the hospital or, there's some reason you were working and you couldn't make it. But it's like in New Jersey, 65% of the people did not vote. 35% of the people came out. To me, 65% of the people didn't vote. I mean, I just find that hard to believe.
So, Derrick, you said it was like 13% voted?
Yeah, 20%? It might be 11%.
Yeah.
It might be 11.
It's even worse.
Wow.
I think some of those places where the votes are low is they turn people away just so that they can't vote.
So there is a lot of voter suppression, but even like before those laws and stuff were passing, like just a vast majority of like just people here were just not voting because the state just makes it so difficult. It was actually I had a closer voting station to me this this vote than I did for the presidential election. I had to drive like 15 minutes further for that. So I also besides wanting to stop that constitutional convention, which I don't feel we need, I also don't want, I've lost my train of thought. Besides fighting the concept, I would like, for there to be like more uniform like procedures between states. Like I get that that's, I guess, the whole point of the United States is that the states are supposed to be able to vote on their procedure. But I kind of feel like for like federal elections and stuff like that, citizens should like have like guaranteed voting time that's not going to be altered between states. They should have like guaranteed voting locations because these governors, like they jimmy around with this stuff and it ends up hurting. Just voting should not be a political tool just for anybody, for any party, whatever system you're using. Like people should be able to vote, no hands barred, like, and not people in Virginia were supposedly getting calls telling them that their station had, changed and those were bogus, and that shouldn't be relevant. Everyone should always know where they're going to vote because it's always in the same spot, and they should be able to get off work for it. I just don't like
have
this,
the polls open to 9.
Yeah, I don't like this like, higgledy-piggledy thing where it's just like a free-for-all. And like in the South particularly, like they purge the voter rolls and do all these things because they don't want certain people to vote. And I was reading an article earlier, and it was like saying that like Texas's voting districts, pretty much almost every year since like 1970, they've had some kind of constitutional problem and had to be like redrawn. And before they gutted the Voting Rights Act, they couldn't just change them. They had to get permission for the Supreme Court because they were a state that had been found to purposefully discriminate, as they've been found to purposefully discriminate again. And, John Roberts, in his infinite wisdom, decided that wasn't needed. And the very first election that we had after that, those maps were also found to be unconstitutional. And I don't think that you should be able to play these games. Like, it's just frustrating.
I think you said it, Derrick, and you said it. Because of the fact that we weren't allowed to vote for so long, and many of us still can't. I definitely get the point of having the right to vote means something, and it does. Yeah. But I think at the same time, at least for the people on this roundtable, and a lot of the people that we either work with or are friends with, I wouldn't put us in the category of people who do nothing. Like if let's say all of us didn't vote, for the sake of argument, and never voted, I don't think it'd be like another person who didn't vote, didn't try to change things, didn't try to go against the system, weren't actively trying to fix things and make things better for other people. Because if someone's just completely apathetic and just either doesn't care or doesn't think anything, can happen, lazy, whatever it is. I mean, to me, that's different. And it's like, well, you're doing nothing to try to fix the mess in front of you. And to me, when I look at the, push the needle far enough where, okay, well, these people aren't as bad as these people, and this bill's not good, but it's better than if it doesn't pass or something like that. I mean, we've been doing that for so long, and at least since the 60s, things haven't really gotten that much better. I mean, to me, I just think we can do both at the same time.
Well, I also think that there's and I think that this contributes, this is why I don't buy into this exceptionalism stuff. I feel like if you think that you live in the greatest place in the world, then what incentive do you have to think of better ways in which your society could run, or happier, more efficient societies? I don't feel like you would have one. And so I feel that and then we're also in school, we learn about quote unquote founders or whatever, and that they were imperfect. I mean, they were perfect deities. And I don't feel like we're challenged to think about this system, quote unquote, critically. And so people, particularly conservatives, but liberals too, really think that this is the best human system that could ever exist. And it's just ridiculous. That is just ridiculous. It's a 200-year-old document. Of course there are changes that could be made. It's just, I feel like it's this exceptionalism idea that keeps us in the same place. I think it's this uncritical view of the founders and their limitations, and frankly, just some undemocratic ideas that they just had. I mean, that's just a fact. I think all of these things kind of contribute to us just going along with the same old thing, acting as if it's the only thing that we could have. And I don't accept that. So I do understand that desire to want to change things. It's just, I don't know. I want to find the most productive means to do that, because it's when it's time to vote, it's I just feel like it's time to vote, and I don't want.
You can't overhaul the system.
Right.
Right before the election.
Right. Yeah, during the election. Yeah. I was looking at this video, and it was talking about this voting system called SVP, and it's basically a voting system that's meant to maximize voter happiness. So it's the voters go in and you rank your favorite candidate 1 through 3, and there's an elimination process. I think you usually need a third of the vote to go on, and it's it basically if your first person gets knocked out, your votes go to your second person. If they get knocked out, their votes go to your third person. So it's meant to maximize voter happiness. And then there's also a model where each new district has 3 representatives and not just 1 or 2. There are other systems and other things that we could look at, but it's we have to look at them and actually be interested in them outside of 6 months before the election.
Yeah.
You all remember Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Eeyore.
Eeyore.
Just me particularly, I'm Eeyore when I go to the polls. Because I'm like, because you talking about like voter happiness. Okay, so they got her and him. I can't stand him. I can't stand her. Some kind of like just. I mean, is there a three-way tie for awful, or is it like okay, one's a little better? Is it like.
Well, I mean, human beings are
I
flawed.
don't feel like that though.
Like
I feel like. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say human beings are flawed, and I don't know that there's ever going to be a voting system where it's like, oh, I just love every single one of these potential candidates, and every one of them says X, Y, and Z. And I mean, very few people who have even lived on the earth have been able to choose anything about like who like leads them or who like helps create laws. And I'm not saying that means that we should just accept anything, but I don't want to also put like this, well, if it's not perfect, I don't want it. I do hear a lot of comments like that, and it's just, I want to make the system more perfect, but I don't know how to give us a system that like everyone's going to be happy with everything. Like,
yeah.
Well, okay, if I was a white person, I would be a lot more appreciative of this system and the political system, at least like the voting system.
Oh, yeah.
But
Uh,
I think it's working for them. They got Trump.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always
and electoral college.
Yeah, but the system is not only not perfect; it's genocidal. And Kima, you said that earlier. So, at least from the way I look at it, there's no even decent situation or passable or not so bad or bad. It's just.
Well, I don't know if the voting system itself is genocidal or if it's the society. I usually attribute that to the society itself, not necessarily like the manner in which we vote, and then the credence that we give like pretty much the southern states who have pretty much always like benefited from the what's it called, electoral college. I don't know exactly how we would go about remedying that, and I don't really know what all the nations of like different native people would want in terms of like trying to restore their sovereignty and expand that. But I want to have those conversations, and I want to hear I want to hear native people in particular talk about those things at least. Like I don't think that those are conversations that we should not have. I just don't know. I think it really must be, I think, how I was raised, and maybe even just being from the South and like my great grandparents not being able to vote for so long, and then my grandparents not being able to vote for so long. I'm not saying that that's the only reason that I vote, because it's not, but it's like, I don't know. I want to do my part to at least try to protect as many people as I can.
I felt I voted for Hillary because I knew how Trump was, and I had to vote for who I thought was best for me, and I know Trump wasn't going to do anything for me. I
voted for Hillary.
Yeah, because
I asked my mom.
We wouldn't be in this situation if it was Hillary.
I asked my mom who she was voting for, and I think, look, if a black woman can do this, she hasn't forgotten what the Clintons did or said. Like, it's not that like we're best friends with the Clintons. I understand all the dislike and apathy towards the Clintons, but I also felt that like this was just going to be a train wreck. Like, and it is. Like, it absolutely is. Like, I don't know if you've like listened to this man like give speeches, but it's like, what are you even saying right now? Like, like you.
Oh yeah, I knew Trump was going to be this bad. I knew it.
it's just, I don't know. Like, this is just, I don't know. I don't know if I can always go with that. They were like both bad. Yeah, they were both bad in both ways. And like, I wasn't passionate about either of them. Like, I never like was like Hillary, but I wasn't like that with Obama either. That's not why I voted for like Obama. And I really have a lot of limited faith in the president of the United States anyway. Because it's not a very powerful position in terms of like heads of state. If like you compare it to other heads of state, like it's not like Congress is the most powerful legislative body in this current system. So the president has most leeway in foreign policy. And I didn't really think that Mitt Romney was gonna, be able to cull the calls of war that are always emanating from that party, even though we always are still at war. So, I don't know. I mean, I do understand people's frustrations, and I do understand their critiques of these people, but it's like...
Yeah.
You do nothing? Or it's like you vote third party, like when you know that like you have to get a certain percentage. And even if there was like in one of the amendments, I think it might be the 22nd, like even if there was like a contested race where there were like 3 candidates where they kind of didn't win a majority, the race then moves into the House and then the speaker picks the president. So I had to ask myself like, well, who is Paul Ryan going to pick as president? Not Bernie Sanders, not anyone else that like we would have wanted. So I just had to do it.
Yeah, well,
I think
the
the
voter
third party
apathy
thing is
thing
more of a morality thing. Like
the voter apathy thing is even within tribal elections, there's such huge apathy that nobody will vote unless they know their wallet is going to be impacted. And and the younger people, and it's not just younger people, but anybody of working age, if you vote, you have to do your research and know something about the candidates to be able to vote, and it takes time and energy. You have to keep up with, what their campaign is about and what their platform is, and so I think that a lot of people just don't want to expend that energy, or they don't have time and they have better things to do, and so they don't vote because they don't know the candidates.
And especially when you have like all these strict voter ID laws, and people of color and poor people are less likely to have them. And yeah, I mean, I do understand for those reasons, like why people just end up not making it out. Like, I do understand. What were you saying, Nolan?
Well, I think the third party thing, at least in my mind, is how I'd go about it. Because I voted third party a couple of times for I was governor. The last time I voted for third party was 2012 governor, because I knew too much about Jerry Brown, and Meg Whitman is just a big business, all about rich people. So I voted third party for governor because I just could not fathom voting for either of these two people. That's exactly like, along with the fact those two bills were on the table, why I didn't vote in the last election. And even from that same friend's standpoint, I got one candidate who's helped legislation along to keep him in prison despite he's innocent. And then I have another one who called for, the Central Park Five to just be killed because we're black. So who had it? But I keep going back to, especially with talking about our two people, what we did before this whole mess happened, and we had actually socialized government, and the people being in control of nations instead of everything at the top, and that's if you're not in the top, you can't really make a decision. Like, here's a vote, and hopefully, it helps.
I don't want to, like, okay, I'm not trying to, like, disagree or anything necessarily with that. I just don't want to necessarily paint, so different parts of Africa, like, had different, like, systems.
Oh, sure.
Some were more centralized, some were less. And so I just didn't want to paint the picture that it was all one thing. And I don't know. I think about this a lot. Like, I don't know how useful it is for me to, like, necessarily be comparing what we have here to, like most Americans don't know very much about, like, the African American experience and, like, our history. Like, I just finished this book called The White Racial Frame. It's basically a book that just talks about, like, the frame that the society kind of has to put Native and Black people in order to, like, justify all the things that have happened to us and, like, rationalize it, and all the forgetting that they do. And I would like to think maybe if we could combat that, maybe we could integrate some of those other systems or look at them, but it's just, I don't know even where to begin to do that, because it's like you try to tell people about Africa, or like you try to give people, like, documents to read, and they don't read them. Like, they don't engage with them. Like, I don't know. It's just like people are very, very apathetic, and I feel like on one hand that's justified, just because of, like, the people that represent them don't end up representing them, and don't end up serving their best interest. But at the same time, it's like most people who have lived throughout the world had no say whatsoever, like, about, like, what happened in their life. Like, whatever, like, warlord or whoever was in charge at that point in time, like, they just made all the decisions. So I struggle with, like, okay, well, what is my balance between acting in the reality that I have now? I have a compass. It's pointing me in the direction that I want to go in, but I'm not there yet. Like, so I want to walk in the direction that I'm trying to go, but I also still have to kind of deal in the area that I'm in right now. Like, this, I don't know, does that make sense? Yeah, I'm sorry if that was convoluted.
No, I get what you're saying.
There's also there's also, like, this passage in, like, this book on Congo cosmology that I'm reading, and it's listing, like, the principles of a strong community. And one of them I spend a lot of time thinking about. It's be a system within a system. And I think a lot about what that would mean for me as, like, a Afro-descendant person living in the Americas, like, not an immigrant, not a person who, like, necessarily chose to come here. What would it mean to, like, be a system within a system? Part of it, I think it would mean, like, meeting with other African and indigenous peoples, and trying to solve things between ourselves. But then I guess it would also imply that we do in some way participate in the larger system until we can either change it or modify it, or I'm not sure. But I was just reading that passage before we started this.
Kind of goes with the separation aspect. I think at least I brought up when we were talking about reparations, going towards what we would want to make a society look like. Granted, that can't happen without some kind of government assistance or us getting on a major scale using capitalism to our benefit, which always scares me when I hear us say that. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with, okay, we have all this, at least for Black folks, we have all this spending power, we have $1 trillion. If we just put it together with our communities, then it's like, oh, okay, then we're going to be able to think for ourselves and act for ourselves, but at the same time, we're still adhering to a capitalist system, which we, as everybody here knows, capitalism is very parasitic. So it's kind of, as a dilemma that you were having to Derrick, it's kind of like, it's hard to put yourself into a certain spot in that construct, or hypothetical construct.
Yeah. I don't disagree.
Another thing is, that every election, they start talking about getting rid of the Electoral College, and after the election it dies down, and then you never hear about it again until the next election. And there's always talk about campaign finance reform, but nobody champions it, and it never goes anywhere. So I don't know what to do if we can't fix those things. I don't know. I just don't think there's any hope to get rid of the two-party system.
Because it's definitely a two-party system. Like, I understand why people vote third party, but like even like when you look at the United States throughout time, there are usually like two parties at one given time. There's sometimes a third, and it usually splits the vote, and one of the other main ones wins. But like that consistency that it's usually like two systems, like it's built in that way. Like it's not a coincidence. Like there's something about the structure that's built that way. And with the election going into the House, if there is ever like an election where there isn't like a decisive winner, or like when it's split between three people, so I was wondering if we could just repeal that and maybe it would make more sense, or would moving more towards a parliamentary system work?
But one thing I do like about European politics, which is not a lot, because it's, they birthed this nonsense we have here, but some countries do have systems set up where you could be a third party or fourth party. It's not so much having another party, it's just all these parties have an actual chance to gain power and even be the prime minister, president, what have you. That would, to me, solve by comparison, what we have right now, a good amount of problems, because these are two demonic parties, and they've done nothing but harm us since they were invented. Even before that, the Federalist and the Whig Party. I mean, they're all these
Democratic, Republican.
Yeah, we need to, even if we choose to work within the system, and like some of us, that's like, okay, that's the only mindset we have. So, okay, that's your way of doing things. Well, then we need to have actual control over tweaking it. And I don't mean like little tweaks, like, okay, here's a mayor here, here's a Senate seat here, actual significant hacks or changes to the system. So an actual party that is of the people, not financed by Soros or the Koch brothers or
do you all, I don't know who it was who was saying, like, the government derives its power from the people, from the consent of the people. Do y'all feel like y'all have given this government y'all's consent?
That's that's the problem I have with it.
I don't really think that I ever gave, or any of my ancestors really gave this government my consent to do really anything. And maybe there just does need to be a conversation. There definitely actually does need to be a conversation about, like, I'm not even trying to be divisive or like trying to be separatist per se. I'm just saying that, like, I sometimes get very, very frustrated, like, when I hear like the political pundits on TV, like, talking about like the universal principles of the nation, and it's like, I didn't necessarily sign off on that, bro. Like, I didn't say that was necessarily a good idea. y'all did, and then this was kind of how it was set up, and then I just kind of had to like organize around it. But like at some point, like this society needs to ask itself, like, how is it planning on reconciling, I guess that.
Yeah, that's a scary proposition. I remember it wasn't of my own accord. I just happened to be around somebody who had it on the Democratic National Convention last year, and they had Senator Booker's at the podium, and he started quoting Thomas Jefferson in a positive light, and I wanted to vomit. I wanted to. I was losing my mind. How are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And obviously there's logical reasons why he did that. Believes in the system that, as you said, Derrick, we never consented to. But that's a key crux that I arrive at, because all this stuff, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, like especially all these words, like these are words that were invented by people that were chopping our heads off and enslaving us, and this system. And I just have and again, I've voted. I'll vote again. It's just I just get really worried when I see, especially RT people, people of color, supporting the system. Like Derrick and I were having a conversation on Facebook yesterday. Like, the lines kind of get blurred when you say, I don't vote or I do vote. Like, it's like one extreme to the other, which at times it can be, but it's, okay, if you vote, then you support a candidate or a system or party. Well, not so much, or yes, but it's always these like hard extremes that don't have any wiggle room, which creates arguments that shouldn't be there, because it's like, well, no, I don't support said candidate, like you guys are saying before, or support a party, or whether you do or don't, but it's just, okay, I'm voting here, I'm doing this, or I didn't vote this time. But I do get worried when I do see us supporting it, because I know how harmful it is to us. To me, it's like, I look at us, and I look at capitalism, and I look at U.S. politics, and it's like we're constantly performing surgery on ourselves, with an organ that we keep rejecting. But we keep trying to put that organ in our body, even though our body's like, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's harmful. Get it out of here. That's my mind. So.
That's a good way to put it.
I would be really interested, like, in just hearing like other people's like opinions on like whether they feel like this government like has their consent or partial consent, or what. Yeah, because I've had that question in my mind for a long time, and I asked it one other time in a group at this party, and like it kind of got quiet. I think it's because they were like all like good Americans, I guess. But and then people act like they've never heard a black person say that, and that's another thing. I really don't feel like it should be that surprising that like I feel that way. Like they like kind of looked at me like I was crazy, and I feel like that was because they don't know a lot or enough of the history. Like they don't. Like the history we learn in school is general. It's so general, and they're not going to go into detail about, technically more black people fought for the British in the Revolution than, Washington. Washington and Jefferson's slaves ran off to fight for the British. Like they're not going to get into all of that, because that, gets in the way of the myth making, and it's just the myth of the country and like what actually happened is always at odds, and like that just has to be reconciled. But yeah, back to the
yeah.
consent.
Well,
Yeah.
I know I didn't learn in school that the Constitution was based on native law. It was unwritten, but and they acknowledged that. But a lot of the Constitution was what the natives already had going on. They just didn't have it written down. The settlers came here and said, "Wow, that's such a great idea. Let's steal it." And they tweaked it and everything. And the natives used to vote. I mean, some of the chiefs were hereditary, but some of them were elected. So you would vote, and you could become chief if the people were behind you. But the other thing too, if you were chief and the people didn't like what you were doing, they could vote you right out. You could be done. Like Trump, the natives would have had him long gone. I mean, there would never be a native like Trump, but they would have, they wouldn't stick it out for another year or whatever. They would, enough people would get together and say, "You're out. You're not representing the people. You're gone." So, but they didn't. Well, actually, the Constitution does have things like that. It's just that it hasn't happened. I mean, they're trying to impeach him, but not fast enough for me.
They're so rigid. Like, it's like you have to get 3/5 of this vote. And I was going to say something, like, just to piggyback off that. Like, I feel like these gun debates would not be happening in a lot of West African societies, because in a lot of West African societies, freedom was kind of defined collectively. Like, of course there's like great amount of freedom, like, but you don't have like necessarily like the freedom to like threaten the entire group. I mean, you don't have to live with this group if you don't want to. Like, you can, go your own way or start your own group. But like, I just find that it's just ridiculous. Like, this individualism that we always have, like this, I have the right to live completely separately and divorced from all reality, even if that means like the planet is warming and it might not be hospitable anymore because I want to, continue with this fossil fuel crap. Like, it's just, I just don't like those kind of elements. Like, I just, and that's why I speak out against them. I just don't, I don't think they're good.
Yeah,
you kind of hit it on the nose. I think this society and the way it's moved constantly is white individualism. Because, speaking on gun laws, the Second Amendment was key to be created because it was putting up a defense against slaves who would take arms and native people who wanted the freaking land to themselves. Yet, no, it was there because, you protect yourself and bear arms. And what if somebody comes into my home, and obviously there needs to be a concrete, constant conversation until the actual history is like, okay, this is history, and there's no argument in this, the sky is blue, and that's the end of the conversation. Instead of, did Columbus reach America? Did he do anything wrong? And why are we asking questions that should be obvious? But I think white individualism has a lot to do with it, because if any challenge to the system itself or the political construct that we are under, it's a negative to the average white individual, because it goes against the power and the privilege that they still have to this very second.
Yep. Hey guys, I gotta drop off. I gotta head to bed.
Oh, no worries. Thank you.
But thank you guys. Have a good one.
You too.
All right, get some rest. We're like close to like 5 minutes left.
in the white racial frame, it basically talks about just that, and like how the United States has come to have like a let me see, has come to basically have like property values that are property rights and like this obsession with property and individual property that like basically wouldn't exist without like the disposition of natives and like chattel slavery. Yeah, like those two institutions like have greatly influenced like that concept of like what you can own. And ever since like there was no like more land that settlers could just go and, you know, write off all their debts and start over, you know, we have like these societal problems or these periods of time where like it's like there's like lots of debt, people aren't making as much money, and technology, I guess, has kind of always or war has always kind of like re-evved the engine back up, but it's like the changes being made by technology are slowing, and the profits aren't being made in the same way. So it's just, I don't know. I don't want to take up.
When you have a head start like they had, you can't recreate that. They've evolved what they're doing, but you can't recreate $1 trillion in free labor and $1.5 billion in stolen land, and not counting South America or Latin America. So they have to keep coming up with different ways to dispossess any freedom that we are trying to march towards, let alone you're talking about just straight out capital. No taxes for the rich. Poor us pay all the taxes, which is ridiculous. There's too many instances where both of our societies, in terms of the majority, not every single one, like Derrick, you were saying earlier, like Ethiopia was a lot more of a monarchy or a oppressive state than another or most on our continent, but it was not everybody on top has everything and everybody on the bottom has nothing. That was just not what we did. And now you can't have like all these conversations in politics. Like, well, free healthcare. Well, yeah, free healthcare. How are you going to pay for it? The military gets all the money. The rich pay no taxes. They pay little taxes. The president paid no taxes for 25 years.
And is making money off the presidency right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had 5 businesses go bankrupt and still didn't have to pay any taxes. So, I mean, we can't have these conversations about free healthcare and free education because how would we pay for it if all the money is being tied up somewhere else or taken? Which is
well, it's just like the school tax. You know, when they started doing the school tax, the seniors were all up in arms because why should they have to pay? Because their kids aren't in school anymore. You know, but they did the school tax so that everybody paid to benefit the kids, and which, you know, because we all know kids need education if you want to get ahead and if you want society to survive. And you want people to have an education and have good jobs, you know, you have to spread it out, you know, instead of, you know, people with young kids paying for all that, everybody pays. You know, that's just how it is. I mean, if you want good roads, everybody has to pay. You know, but the thing is, when you make more money, they don't want to pay more. You know? And they're making money off of people that are working for them, you know, and they don't want to give anything back. You know, the trickle down doesn't work. We've tried that, you know, but
that's been like since Bacon's Rebellion, and like the planter elite, when they decided that they wanted to like insulate themselves after that rebellion from potential further crown intervention, they started courting like the poor whites mainly by offering low taxes. And that's where that comes from, and that's why it's always been around. That was instrumental in the revolution, and getting people to kind of sign on and to side with them over the crown, because lots of what they were concerned about, like the class that Washington belonged to and Jefferson and the family that my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was enslaved by, like they were the planter elite. Like they did not have the same problems or worries as everyone else. But they made people feel as though that they were like a part of the same class by lowering taxes and like creating this shared white identity that didn't really exist before. And so all of a sudden you start seeing like Irish people getting a few more rights, and then this is like their start into the induction that kind of goes into like the late, I guess, 19th century until like it's finally complete, but they could suddenly like own guns, and then it was illegal for an African or a Native person to strike a Christian, and all of these different things that have been built just on a lot more complex of a narrative than what they tell you in school.
Yeah.
We had I remember the week because I saw how much money that was being spent. It was tens of billions of dollars on the military spending vote, and it was the Senate voting. It was middle of September this year, and only like 8 or 9 senators voted no on it. I think it was like 700. I think it was $700 million. I have to check the internet.
Yeah,
for that.
something like that.
It was a lot, and it would have paid for free college 2 times over. So, like, you know, obviously, some of us either in college or close to that age, or been to college, or even thought about it. Or it costs a lot of money to go to college.
People like Betsy DeVos, what they're trying to do is they're trying to like slowly erode like this concept of like the social construct, like the social contract, and like they're like collective things that we pay for. You see her doing it with education, gutting education, trying to make everything charter schools, and I'm not universally against charter schools, but like privatizing education, making it harder to get. So if your parent can't pay some high tuition to send you where the good teachers are, you know.
Yeah, we're going backwards because they did that, you know, with the public schools because people couldn't afford it. Back in the day, only the people that had money could go to school, and most people didn't go to college. You know, so they're trying to go back to that where if you're rich, you can go to school, and you know, and if you're poor, well, forget you. You know, that's what they're trying to bring it back. Everything they just want to roll back and do backwards. But you know, there's a reason all that everything's in place because it was bad before. You know, like Obamacare is the result of people not having health care, so they made up the Obamacare so that in the long run it was going to cost less money because people are going to the doctors earlier. You're not waiting 6 months to go to the doctors because you can't afford it. You're going earlier and they're catching cancer. So therefore, it's cheaper in the long run. You know, and Trump with all the drug companies and everything else speaking in his ear with their hands out, want it all rolled back, and just let them die. If they can't afford it, let them die, you know.
And people will.
They will die. I think they predicted without Obamacare like 10,000 people will die. And
people are going to die. people are going to die. It's that sad. But looking at it from a bipartisan issue, even with Trump, there's been so many Democrats behind the scenes supporting him, even ones who are in office right now, the most liberal ones even. And
yeah, well, because you know what, if they're not crooked before they go in, they're crooked when they come out.
You can't leave Washington without keeping your soul, or you can't enter Washington without giving up.
Yeah. Well, they got all the lobbyists. They should outlaw all these lobbyists that are saying, "Oh, we got this much to give you. If you promote this."
Because of the lobbyists, you have to, or you can't get elected without adhering to the system, because you have to put enough money to have a campaign to even get elected or have a chance.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the amount of money they spend on campaigning is crazy.
Right. If you don't have a big business backer, you would be crazy to spend. Even if you have that money of your own, you'd be crazy to spend that on a political race and then lose it. If you lose the race, no, they spend everyone else's money, so you got to get sponsors.
I think even if you run, you kind of get a book deal out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But does anybody ever check when you go to get your license? I think it's when you get your license. Or no, when you do your tax return. Would you like $1 of your refund to go towards the I guess it's the presidential campaign, or? I
see it, but I don't ever check that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember early on I used to be like, yeah, heck yeah, I used to always say to my tax lady, does it cost me anything? She's like, no. Now I'm heck no.
That whole time that Hillary was running, the DNC was campaigning or trying to finance, raise money so hard. I used to get emails, just 10 emails a day.
Oh yeah.
I said from the beginning, I'm not giving you any money. You're lucky enough to get this vote, and that's all you get from me, lady. That's all
exactly.
You get. I don't have any money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Y'all are millionaires.
Yeah, and if they're not ultra millionaires like Betsy DeVos or billionaires, then they have to pander to the millionaires and billionaires.
Right.
Yeah, with their offshore accounts.
Yeah.
How much money do you think Trump has made being a president already?
No.
And he just promoted his golf course while he's out on this trip. If Obama promoted anything, the Republicans would have been up in arms.
Oh my gosh.
They would have went nuts.
Politics is partly always hypocritical, but it's just, I don't like the people who represent us.
Yeah.
I don't like
politicians are always so sleazy.
And not just sleazy, just lie. Just Trump knows that he wants to cut these darn taxes because that's how he's made his money, by effing not paying his investors and, not paying his debts and, collecting tax breaks over all these years.
Yeah.
That's how they make their money.
Well, Chris Christie forgave him for his taxes in the casino.
Oh, yeah. It's funny that Hillary didn't even win, and she got money off her book deal. She's number one on the bestseller list. And when she was, before she became president a while back, her fraud of a foundation, her and Bill's, spent $50 million on just airfare, just travel.
Yeah.
But I think a book deal is different because you're voluntarily buying her book. You're not being taxed, and it goes towards the book. You're going out there and you're buying it so more power to her to sell that many books.
I just don't.
Is it?
I don't feel that I should have to supplement the lifestyle of these people. Like I just don't. Like the Texas legislature meets once every other year for 140 days. You get a $30,000 a year like pension after like 6 years. That's not even very long.
Yeah, that's all craziness.
And you work every other year. Like that's just. I just don't know at what point they convinced themselves that they were like entitled to these things, but
yeah, it's really nice that you can vote for your own vacation and insurance packages,
Or like to
I wish my employer let me do that.
to take everyone else's health care away, but you keep it.
Yeah.
Well,
that was one of the things where they were saying they should have the same health care package we do, and look how fast health insurance would change.
Exactly.
Well, I heard Derrick say something that caught my attention because it's never. Now I'm trying to remember what he said, but they've never represented us, and then the problem is the people that they represent are trained to think that they're better right out of the womb.
Right, and that they are really representing them. Like those families were never going to like give up like all the lands that they took, or like they were never going to let you like ascend to their status. Like, in fact, that's where the word condescend comes from. That period where like the rich would come and condescend to like the poor people and act like they were interested in you and like they knew you. Like that was kind of like part of like the trade-off. Like it's just, I don't like this system. So I do understand where that sentiment comes from, but it's like, I can't get rid of it tomorrow. We haven't even begun to explain to people like the problems with it. Most people do feel like it, these people are like representing them and don't, necessarily follow politics. Because there's people who just are not that political. Like they just want to work and, get a pension and take care of a family. And I guess I understand that, but it's like, I can't just accept that we're just frozen here forever. But then I also can't do nothing when the options come to like pick this sheriff who's going to deport all these people or pick this sheriff who's not going to deport people. I'm not a big fan of sheriffs.
And that's that right there. You have to pick a sheriff. Like that alone is just troubling as hell. Like it's like asking a Jewish person to pick an SS officer. Which one is your favorite? Which one do you want to choose? Like, why do we have to choose either? But like you said, one is much worse than the other. So it's like, okay, I'll go with that one. But thus is colonization.
Better than if they picked themselves.
Right.
Imagine that.
If whoever gets
we'd have KKK would be head of the police.
Oh,
they'd be wearing their white hoods.
And there's so many reports that are coming out about that KKK members infiltrating police and the FBI, and no one's even acting like they care.
I came out under Obama and nobody cared. Now under Trump,
there was a newspaper report in 1999 that first reported that, and then there was another one in 2006 that was under Bush, and then there was another one just a few years ago. Like it's been going on for like 15 years, and we keep acting like they don't. Like the FBI is releasing these reports saying like they're infiltrating law enforcement. Like I posted, I shared a link where there were officers in Texas found to have like neo-Nazi stuff in their like locker rooms, and like they had tortured over like 100. Yeah, like it's just.
And you could tell, you could look at some of them, and they have like a certain kind of haircut,
And I've heard that they're in California too.
Oh, yeah. When I was about, I would say 16, 17, there was these two adorable, beautiful little white girls, and they were in a duet band together. That was like the unofficial band of, whatever you would call the alt-white back then. So just neo-Nazis, the KKK. And that was back in Bush's time. So it's been going. Well, that's the whole thing with the whole thing. This whole thing has been going on forever. It's just like what are we calling it now? Oh, it's slavery. Oh, okay, it's Jim Crow. Is it prison industrial complex? It's just same.
All of the above.
Yeah, but we went like over time by a good minute.
Well over time.
Yeah. Hopefully
from Indian time.
See y'all next week.
Of course. It was good to see you all.
Yeah.
Good
talking to you. Renishi.
You'll have a good week.
You too.
All right. Thank you.